drop assistance begins as soon as possible. Accordingly, we should do what we can to speed up the process by which disaster assessments occur, thereby helping reach decisions about relief more efficiently and expeditiously. Currently, multiple federal agencies conduct preliminary damage assessments after disasters occur, leading to a duplication of efforts. This bill would establish a working group led by the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA, to identify opportunities to restructure federal disaster assessments with a goal of eliminating overlap by agencies. This will not only save taxpayer dollars, but will better assist victims who have often lost everything in that disaster. For that reason, I support H.R. 1306, encourage you all to do so, and yield back.
I thank the gentlelady for that explanation. I would now recognize the ranking member for any statement on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank not only you, Mr. Chairman, but the chairman of the subcommittee for her willingness to work in a bipartisan fashion to move this legislation. And also to compliment you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member of this full committee. This is a very substantial markup with real bills that will make a real impact. And so I want to just compliment you on your leadership and thank you so much for allowing this bipartisan piece of legislation to come before the body. I want to thank Representative Scott Peters of California for his work. And as the chairman said, this is just a common sense piece of legislation, and I can tell you what it truly addresses for us is there is an alphabet soup list of agencies that are always requiring information. And as Congressman Rouser knows all too well in North Carolina, what happens is over and over and over again, we get requests for information. And you supply the information for one agency only to find out that there's another agency and yet another agency and another agency that requests similar information and suggests that the request has not been completed. So this actually puts it under the FEMA's direction, hopefully consolidates it. It is a good government common sense bill. I would ask my colleagues to support it. And with that, in the interest of time, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. I now recognize Ranking Member Graves for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say how happy I am that today this committee is considering several bills that are going to improve disaster recovery efforts in the United States. Every single one of our districts at one time or another has been hit by one disaster or another. In my district right now, and many districts throughout the Midwest, we're being hit by some very severe flooding. So I appreciate what this committee can do to continue to improve our federal disaster programs, and I have no doubt that everyone in the room feels the same. And specifically on this bill, I do want to thank Subcommittee Ranking Member Meadows for his leadership on this piece of legislation. The bottom line is that when we reduce duplication and streamlining the damage assessment process, that's going to go a long way to speed up these recovery efforts. And with that, I'd urge support of this legislation. Yield back the balance.
Any other members wish to be recognized?
Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that we're considering these bills that streamline our approach to disaster relief. But I really want to go on record saying that I think I have the feeling that with these notwithstanding these important bills, particularly the ways in which they allow us to get to a disaster, and instead of putting bureaucracy in the way, that I very much have the feeling of fiddling while Rome is burning. Climate change is upon us, and some of you are from parts of the country where you cannot deny that to be the case. And yet there has been no federal study on the effects of climate change on our country. We are way behind the ball on even understanding climate change, and by dealing with these bills, important as they are, we are dealing with minute effects that will have in some parts of the country little effect, if if they have the kind of disasters we're seeing confront them throughout the country, FEMA and nobody else will be able to deal with those unless the country comes to grips with climate change and adopts a policy that begins to grapple with it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlelady. Any other members which to be recognized? Yes, gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the ranking member Meadows and Congressman Peter for introducing this legislation. We are a co-sponsor. He has absolutely hit the nail on the head, going through numerous disasters. Disaster victims are often asked to apply and provide the same information 5 and 6 times to different agencies. No data sharing. The damage assessment process, the same thing. Local government, state government, and multiple federal agencies are tripping over each other, coming up with inconsistent information that's supposed to guide us on the investment of billions of dollars in the response to disasters. I do want to highlight as we move forward, we did enact H.R. 1679, PL 11587 last Congress, which does get into the online database component of this. We ought to talk about it. And also, Ranking Member Meadows, just looking forward to working with you. A few things as we move forward, looking at how we do a better job with temporary housing and long-term recovery. We're paying triple in some cases, and I think it's a right place for efficiency there. Also, alternative arrangements, including NEPA. As you and I have discussed, we've seen where they're doing individual NEPA assessments on every single home. Whenever you may have a neighborhood that has cookie-cutter homes without lead, asbestos, and other things, it is a waste of money and ultimately taking away from disaster victims. Lastly, the amount of compliance cost. We had a contract in Louisiana, I believe they issued for $250 million to a contractor to administer this program just to comply with the federal regulations. It's outrageous. It is taking money away from flood victims and delaying the process. So thanks again for doing this. It's a step in the right direction.
Would the gentleman yield?
Please.
I want to thank the gentleman for his leadership in so many areas. I mean, representing the state of Louisiana, it would be very easy to have this as your priority. But let me just tell you, you have dug in, you have highlighted problems that we have and worked in a bipartisan way. I want to thank the gentleman for his leadership, and I look forward to working with him and the ranking member of our committee, but also the 2 chairmen, and I thank them, and I yield back to the gentleman from Louisiana.
I thank the
Yield back.
2 gentlemen. I would, just out of order, recognize the gentleman from North Carolina. If you might see there's someone very prominent standing in the door from North Carolina.
Actually, that's my guest.
Okay,
so
very
I
good.
appreciate it. So I would like to recognize Miss North Carolina, who is here today.
All right.
We thank you for your leadership.
Excellent, thank you. I would have recognized had I known who invited her. In any case, are there any amendments to 1306?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, what?
over here.
Where?
Mr. Chairman,
I'm going to be happy when we get back in our room. Yeah, the gentleman from North Carolina. I'm from California. God,
California.
I got stuck on North. Sorry,
but a tough act to follow, Miss North Carolina. But nevertheless, I just wanted to call to the attention of the committee. The National Low Income Housing Coalition rightly noted to the members of this committee that the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is not included in the working group under H.R. 1306 as currently drafted. This is despite the Department of Housing and Urban Development being covered by the study to streamline and consolidate information collection and preliminary damage assessments elsewhere in the bill. This is a legitimate concern that should be rectified before the bill is considered by the full House, as HUD properties are often damaged during these disasters, and would request that it be taken under consideration.
Well, I
yield
thank the gentleman for his concern and his remarks, and as we move toward the floor, there is another committee working on this legislation. There's some jurisdictional issues, and be happy to attempt to accommodate his concerns if we go to the floor. So
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Any other members wish to be recognized at this point? If not, there are no amendments. Then the question is now on the adoption favorably reporting H.R. 1306. House of Representatives. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by saying nay. Nay. It's unanimous. Bill as amended is approved and ordered reported to the House. We now move on to H.R. 1307.